Bonjour, comment ça va? Dear friends, I am here once again to share with you another conversion story of a sinner who became a saint. And these conversion stories of sinners who became saints helps us during the season of Lent to have conversion in our own lives and come closer to God. Do you find it hard to obey? Why obedience is so difficult? Because we want the things to be done in our own ways. We like to do things in our own ways, and we do not want anyone to tell us what to do. Disobedience can be caused by our selfishness and our pride because we want to do things in our own way and for our own pride we do not want to obey the commands or the directions of others. Therefore, we want to do things in our own way. Can disobedience cause us great consequences? Yes, the story of our first parents, Adam and Eve, teach every one of us a great lesson of disobedience. The immediate reason for the first parents to be driven out of paradise was their disobedience towards God. What caused them to disobey God? Their selfishness and their greedy to become like God, to know things like God, and to enjoy being like a God. This desire and this selfishness, what caused them to disobey God's commandments, and it caused them to be thrown out of the paradise. Adam and Eve had everything in abundance in paradise. The moment they disobeyed God and thrown out of the paradise, they had to work hard to earn for their food. That is the consequences of disobedience. In our own lives, disobedience can cause great things. We might lose a lot of things. We might lose a lot of people. We might lose great things, great opportunities due to disobedience. Therefore, during the season of Lent, it might be a good opportunity for us to look into our own lives and see how obedient are we in our lives, or how we give more importance for our selfishness and our pride and be disobedient in our lives. Today we are able to see a conversion story of a saint who was a very angry young man, very intense person with an angry disposition and tendency to disobey. But when he had conversion and began to obey, he became a great saint. But when he learned to obey and began to obey, he became from an ordinary person to a great monk. That saint who, because of his obedience, became a great monk is Saint John the Dwarf. Saint John the Dwarf also was known as Saint John Colobus. Colobus means in Greek short. Saint John the Dwarf was an Egyptian desert father of the early Christian church. As a young man, Saint John the Dwarf was an angry and very intense person. But when he became the disciple of Saint Pambo in the seats of desert, he learned obedience and became a model of great obedience. Saint John the Dwarf is best known for his obedience. The most famous story about his obedience is that one day Saint Pambo gave John the Dwarf a piece of dry wood and ordered him to plant and water it. John obeyed and went on watering it twice a day, even though the water was about 12 miles from where they lived. After 3 years, the piece of wood sprouted and grew into a fruitful tree. Saint Pambo took some of this tree's fruits and went around to all the elder monks, saying, "Take and eat from the fruit of obedience." That is how an angry young man, a very intense person, turned from a very disobedient person to a very obedient person, even to obey unto what he cannot reason. But his obedience brought fruits of it. After the death of Saint Pambo, John was ordained a priest by Pope Theophilus and became abbot of the monastery. The beautiful conversion story of Saint John the Dwarf helps us to understand how important it is to be obedient in our lives, to our parents, to our elders, to our superiors, because by being obedient, we are trusting God and His providence. Jesus Christ is the greatest model and example of obedience. He obeyed the Father even unto death on a cross. And the fruit of his obedience is resurrection and a place by the right side of God in heaven. Whereas the fruit of disobedience of our foreparents was the loss of paradise. Let us pray to Saint John of Dorf that we learn obedience in our lives. Our children learn to obey. That by obeying, we obey God Himself, and we trust in God, and we trust in God alone. May Saint John the Dwarf pray for every one of us that we leave behind our selfishness and pride and learn to obey God faithfully in our lives and also enjoy the fruits of obedience. May God bless you and have a beautiful day.